As I told you, we did 20 residencies, and the goal was to check does co-design work in any kind of issues. And what we can say now is that we had all kind of issues in education, mobility, urbanism, culture, employment, health, climate change, and progressively we had more projects about the bureaucracy itself. What I call bureaucracies, for instance, how to use co-design to reframe sustainable procurement. Uh, we got a friend, Chris and I got a friend in London called Indy Joa. He called this boring innovation, and we know now that co-design can also reframe boring innovations such as sustainable procurement. Or we had also the opportunity to work with a group of elected officials and to work with them on how can you improve their working environment. They have phones, they have laptops, but they don't really know how to use it properly. So how can you improve the working environment of politicians and elected officials? And we also work on the future of city hall. So first, the feeling that we have is that this kind of co-design and co-creation process can be used on any kind of challenge. This is our feeling. Maybe I can go a bit deeper in the protocol of residence. One residence is always one challenge. For instance, access to health in rural areas. So we got to find a challenge where everybody is happy with. There are always 2 or 3 co-founding partners who will pay for the residence. For instance, you can have the municipality and the regional government and the ministry, and they pay together for this. The reason why is that we don't want the residents to be we don't want to be suppliers. We build a shared experience, and nobody owns it. So it's owned. The municipality owns it, the regional government owns it, the ministry owns it, la 27e Région owns it. It's a common. It's a shared resource. There is a contract where we define the responsibilities, where la 27e Région engage in doing the work, but the government has also to engage in bringing resources, that the civil servant will spend time in it. So there is a contract where we share responsibilities. There is always one research field, for instance, a village who is about to create a new health house. So it will become the place where we will do the residence. Then we will build a cross-disciplinary team with a junior and senior professional paid by la 27e Région with the help of the partners. So la 27e Région is kind of the third player, the neutral player between the design professional and social professional and the government and the field. And it's important for us to have junior and seniors, because we want junior to become progressively senior. We need new professional in the field, because there are not so much. It's always 3 immersive weeks spread on 5 to 6 months. So the team comes 1 week, then she leaves, then she will come 1 month later, and then 1 month later. There is always a blog for open documentation. It's based on Creative Commons. And the cost of residence is about, in our experience, it's about 70,000 euros. We began very lower, but it was too expensive for us. I mean, we lost money in the first residences, and at the end it was more 80 or 90,000 euros. So generally speaking, on 20 residents, the cost was 1.2 million euros. So that was what it cost. What cost the whole program. I show you so maybe a few what came afterwards on the program. With the experience of 20 residencies, we had the possibility to publish return on experience toolkits, blogs, case mapping, manuals, playbooks, all of them written with the team of designer and sociologists, and and the civil servant who were part of the residencies. So we have transformed this into, we have evaluated the residence, we have built manuals, we have built toolkits on how to do this kind of residence. The residence became a test bed for around 60 professional in design, etc. It was a test bed for many designers who now became senior. I mean, many of them, when we began with them 10 years ago, they were young, they were 25, they were just coming from design school or sociologist university or whatever. And I think the residencies were very helpful for them to go on the ground and to have their first practice of co-design. And many of them now are professional designers. They got their agency. They are designer in government. But residencies here in France for all this community was a very interesting test bed because they had no opportunity to work in a school or to be in immersion in an hospital or whatever. And what we have done with this community, because it became a community, is that we, beside the residencies, the community want to have a reflexive thinking about what are the outputs of residence, what does it mean in terms of what is the job of a designer in a public organization. So every year we add living schools. So we bring the community on the beach in the south of France, as you see on the photos, and we had a nice time together, but we had also a very interesting conversation about the ethics of design. What can we learn from co-design practice and residencies in terms of how can we progress together as professionals? On the right side of my side, you see also we have bring them into annual study trips. We have met the community of the co-design community in Malmö, in Madrid, in London. So yeah, it was a way also to get this community grow and also to create win-win situation because when you're a professional designer, what you need is to develop your activities. So we were a place where these people had the residencies, but there was also other activities where they can develop together. So it's a bit like a co-development activities. What happened afterwards is that Territoire en Résidence was also a source of inspiration for new programs. For instance, there were many governments who did 3 or 4 residences. And those people came to us and said, hey, we like residences. We really enjoyed it. It made the proof of concept. But now we would like to have our own La 27e Région inside our government. And we said, we don't know if it's possible, but we can launch a new program where the research question will be, is it possible to do it? And we have launched a new program called La Transfo that we have done. It was a huge program in 2 different editions. And the output is that we have helped something like 12 governments, including the city of Paris, to create its own innovation lab. It's a social and design innovation lab in the government. So, for instance, the photo that you see here is the team of civil servants we were working with in the city of Mulhouse. And we've done it in regional government, in cities, in metropolitan areas, and so on. And another inspiration, another project that came from Territoire Résidence was a project called Villages of the Future. It was how do you use this kind of network of designer, government, in a region, in a territory? How do you transform this as a new way to do development? So they have launched this Village du Futur. So it's in a rural area in Burgundy. And there are teams of cross-disciplinary team that helps a small village during 5 months to reframe its business activities or to build new activities in terms of ecological transition or whatever. Because, as you know, in these rural areas, there is no designer, there is no urbanist, there is no. So, how do you bring this kind of profession and professional to help to tackle the challenge of this village? And this program is now growing, and it's growing at the level of Burgundy as a region, and it's even growing in France as something that could be developed in other rural areas. So that's it. That was my testimony as a. I don't think that we had in mind, as you have now, to create a community for co-design or co-creation and to develop research of development activities. So now I regret that we didn't have this in mind, and if I had to do it again, maybe I would do it differently. But anyway, I think this is really the way that we first made the proof of concept of co-design activities, because you got to prove to people that it works. I mean, it's just an hypothesis. So how do you prove it? So it was a very good way for us when we began our activities 13 years ago to prove that, yeah, these things work. They are prerequisite, but it can work. And second, to build a community of not only design professional or sociologists, but also innovators in government, and build this community of practice. And this is a way we have developed this. So that was my presentation about territoire en résidence. Now we've got many new programs, and I have no time to develop it. But I was really curious to check first if it makes sense, if my presentation makes sense for you, if it's fit with, if it gives you ideas about the way you will develop your own community. So really, I'm curious to know more about your thinking. I stop sharing, and I'm
Thank
with
you, Stéphane. It was very inspiring to hear like the whole journey, right? Like it's always interesting when you hear someone reflect back and what are the sort of like the elements that we need to incorporate in our own process. Which of course there will be elements that will work, others that we need to adapt, and also we'll have our lessons learned after some months of work. But thank you for sharing your journey so openly.
Thank you, Stéphane, for sharing that. So, thanks for sharing that. It's also inspirational to hear your story, and I think I think there's some things that always strike me in hearing about your work that are important for all of us. I think you talked a lot about the ethic underpinning what you do, sort of knowing that there's going to be a follow through with work. Knowing that work can't be censored, knowing that you can want to put the work out into the commons, and it made me reflect about our work in Australia and the importance of that. It also made me reflect on the importance of developing new kinds of offers, that the residency, it's not sort of fitting into a pre-box, and I think sort of you've developed. That's something I'm always impressed with what you've done. Many different kinds of offers that sort of I think sort of engage people in interesting ways outside of existing procurement. I mean, I'm sure that makes it really hard as well, but I think that in the offer is also relevant. And I think finally, and I think something that we talked about last time in terms of the workforce for research and development ecosystems, but that idea of how do you grow the workforce and the emphasis that you put on that, and working with younger people or less experienced people in order to build that capability over time. So I thought that was a very notable aspect of that, and how do you kind of make it developmental? So I mean, all things that our Basque colleagues can think about with this sort of vision that they have at the outset, but really what's the under ethic and some spirit of what you're doing.
No, that it's interesting that you say that, because when you want to build a community, you got to have in mind that I'm sure that in the room today at Anzazu Lab, there are many people. We all want co-design and co-creation, but the reality is that some of us are consultancy, some other are researcher and have our public organization. Some other are non-profit. So how do you? So there are private and public organization. How do you create something that is a shared resource, that is not exactly business, that is not exactly public, but it's more something that we can share all together. So you must create win-win situation. For instance, it's more difficult now in our community because the young designer became senior and they don't need us anymore. And they have created their own agency, and we can't involve them anymore in this kind of process because they are too expensive. So another thing is that co-creation became a business. When we started 30 years ago, it was quite new. But the reason why we ended in 2080 is that, it was not new anymore. There was public procurement for design project. There was the state is buying designers. Every government is buying designer. So there was less interest to do this as a shared and experimental activities than when we began. So when you want to build a workforce, you got also to look at the trajectory of this workforce, because and really think about the needs of this workforce, and the needs are not the same when you're a consultant. For instance, what I see in design consultancy is that, okay, they develop their business, and what they want is to develop maybe 20% of their activity in research and development. So maybe this is where you can have partnership with them. If you want to build a community, really be in the mindset of the people who need to make a living. It's really fun to do co-development activities. But how do you make a living? How do you pay your salaries? How do you spend times in collective project like this? And I must admit that we were very good at it during 8 years. And progressively, we became less good at this because the people we were working with, they don't need anymore. They have developed activities. They have developed their own communities. So you really got to simulate and to project in the long term. So my advice to Basque Country would be think about now, but also project in 3-4 years, because the needs of the community will change. Because people will become better, they will become. The role of a community is to progress collectively, but once people have progressed, they don't need it anymore, or they need something else. So how do you renew the challenge of the community? How do you bring new values that interest people, and always think into a win-win situation? People don't come to you just because it's fun and nice, and because it's fun to develop collective activities like this, and to publish, and to do ethics, to think about collectively about ethics. But the reality is that you got to consider make a living and
making a living, and then also having sense, right? Like
I would be curious to know in the audience about consultancy, for instance. How do they consider themselves in such a community? Is it easy when you're the boss of a design agency to be part of research and development and collective projects such as Basque Country, for instance.
Norbait animatzen da galdera erantzuten? Yeah, I was reflecting, Stéphane, while you were talking that it's true that there needs to be so like that. But I'm talking to Stéphane, so I prefer to do it in English. Nayara was asking me to do it in Basque, but I feel like I'm talking to Stéphane, so it's weird to talk to Stéphane in Basque. It was just like, it was resonating what you were saying in terms of like, you need to make sure that there's a quality of living, and also I feel like there needs to be that shared purpose, right? Like having something, so it's the extrinsic and intrinsic value. So how you sort of like have those two elements, and how do you make sure that those shared elements are sort of like shared together or like built together, so that it's not, yes, someone do it from an angle, but it needs to be having that shared angle. And hearing your reflection, it was, I think, something that it resonated for the co-creation ecosystem as well here is how do we think, and maybe now I switch to Basque, nola egiten dugun ere, hasiera batetik igual hausnarketa egiteko, hau eskalatu nahi baldin badugu, ze elementutan pertsatu hartu aldez aurretik, ez? Igual gabiltza epe, da, normala igual hasiera batean, eta martxa hartzen goazen heinean, lehenengo urratxoietan pentsatzea, baina ja planteatzen baldin badugu, ez? Olako ekosistema bat azten jungo dela, eragilean hitzak egongo diela, honen parte izango dienak, eta nola pentsatzen dugun malgutasun hori eta eskalatze kontzeptu hori barnebiltzeko. Eta horrekin batera ere, geratu naiz beste hausnarketa batekin, Stéphane egiten zuena, dala inteligentzia partekatuarena, ez? Hemendik sortzen dana, eta aurrekoan ere onginen horren inguruan hausnarketa egiten. Nola egiten dugun hori, hemen sortzen dana, guztiona izateko, nola partekatzen dugun ezagutza hori, nola gardentasunez partekatzen dugun, nola... Ordan horre badaude, hausnarketarako beste elementu batzuk ere gure ekosistema honetara ekartzeko. Eta beste baten batek Stéfanek egiten zuen, bai, galderaren arira? Txin, ez hau piztuta,
Bai, horren bai, ez? Bai, ez? Bai, bueno, nik hausnarketa horri lotuta, Stéfanek gomendio batzuk eman dizkigu, ez da? Zer egin behar dugun, epe motzean, epe laburrean, beraien esperientziatik. Nik ez nuke aukera galdu nahi, bere momentuan alasneri eta kriseri baita ere eskatu nielako, ez? Eta orain Stéphane zuri baita ere galdera antzekoa egin nahiko nizuke, eta da hurrengoa, ez? Jarri guzu erronka bat, zure ustez, hemen sortzen ari garen kosorkuntza ekosistema honek, zein da, zein erronka gaitzazu, ez? Inglesez esaten challenges, zuk momentuko testu ingurutik, ikusten dituzun beharretatik, zein da gure gain hartu beharko genukeen erronka, ezberdin egiteko, ez? Edo benetako urrats hori, ez? Ekarpen hori egiteko benetan.
Okay, so my challenge would be the following. Be ready for the challenge. I want you in 2 years to build partnership with 4 different schools in Basque Country. And the reason why I say that is what we discovered when you want to build community, that you got to prepare the future generation of professionals. And one of the way to do that is to build partnership with young professionals who come from sociology or design or any kind of discipline who deals with co-creation activities. Because if you don't do that now, in 2 years, you will wake up and realize that you did not prepare the new generation. This is something that we have met here. I mean, it's very difficult to find good co-design professionals here in France now. I mean, they are, but they are rare. There are maybe, 40 people. The rest is bullshit. The rest is fake design, fake co-creation activities, and it's not very ethic and so on. So my advice and the challenge for you is that in 2 years you build partnership or you help governments or any kind of players to build partnership with let's say 3 schools, because 4 is maybe too much, but that you build partnership with at least 3 different schools in the Basque Country, and make sure that students can do projects, co-design project with you, and they can be part of it. If you do that, you will prepare the next generation. And another challenge would be to mix them. So not just one school alone, but to mix the students between design school, sociology, politics, I don't know, and to get them work together in a field project, in a real project. If you do that, then I think that in 2 or 3 years you will be happy to have to see young people who are 22, 23, because I'm a veteran now. It's over. I mean, we need to prepare the next. Chris is an old guy too. He knows it, and he needs to prepare the next generation. And this is something you must do a few years before. So this is my challenge. Build some partnership with schools, and not for the schools, but for the students of the schools. So make sure that students can work with you, or young professional coming from the school can work with you in the project. If you do this, you prepare the next generation.
Well, first of all, Stéphane, it's not over. Otherwise, it's over for all of us. So what's going to happen? Who's going to build it in the coming 2 years? It's not over. And thank you. We take on the challenge. We take on the challenge, and actually, we are already starting up our relationships with different schools, coming from different sectors and areas, as you say, because we see, and especially focusing on our main target, Arantzazula target, is the collaborative governance. So we have to deal with the new political system, we have to deal with the public sector, and we see a few designers with competencies and the understanding of what this new political and public system means. So we want to mix, as you say, like different competencies from sociology, design, but also like politics, and prepare like new generations with a broad and wide scope and understanding of the complex challenges, because it's needed. I mean, we cannot consider a challenge just a social challenge if we don't consider the connections with the other fields. So, but we are very happy to take on the challenge, thank you, and also happy to be like doing the journey together with you, Stéphane, and also with our friends and partners in Australia. So thank you so much. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are ready to join the boring revolution as well. So we want to be part of that, of that boring revolution.
Welcome in the boring revolution.
Yeah. So we, yep.
Is there another question? Yeah.
Aipatu duzu oso zaila dela Frantzianko diseinuko profesional onak lortzea, gutxi daudela, baina txarrak asko direla. Edo behintzako diseinu faltsua egiten dutenak, edo ez duena ezertarako balio. Eta karo, gu profesional bezala ere, akatxo horietan erorrez gaitezen, ez dakit nola bereiztu, ezertarako balio ez duen kodiseinua, eta nola ekidin, ez?
Difficult question.
There are many controversies in the design sector about what is good design and what is bad design. What I can tell you is that, and maybe that could be another challenge, is that in the same time that you develop design practice and co-creation activities, I suggest that you develop space for thinking about the ethics of it. If you take, I mean, there are we did a report for the national government last year about the situation of design in the public sector. And one of the challenge that we mentioned is that many co-design projects don't go till the end. There are many, there is a hype around design and co-creation activities here in France. But if you look carefully at this project, I don't know exactly, but maybe 20% of them are going till the end, are not just ideation process and co-creation activities. There are really new solutions that come at the end, and very few of them go till the solution. So there is an issue, and I won't say that there are good designer and bad designer. It's just that there are some project where design is used where it's just fake and it's not serious and it's not ethics. And there are the ones that there are more rigorous use of design with evaluation methodology, with where people recognize where the project has failed, and it's not just a marketing around the project. So my advice would be, and I think it's coming not from the service design community, but more from the UX community. For instance, in France, there is a group called Ethic by Design, which is a group of designers who are thinking about what they want to accept as a project and what they want to refuse and say, no, I don't want to be part of it. As a professional of design, I don't want to be part of it. And they have developed grids, charts, and many thinking to explore what is a good project based on design. So I think the only way to do that is to develop a reflection in your group about what we don't want to do anymore because we think it's not fair, it's not worth it. Sometimes design, to be honest, design in a situation or in an organization where it's not prepared, etc., can even make the situation worse. There is no neutral effect of design. If there is a philosopher in France, he's dead last year. He said he compared innovation as a medicine, and he said if innovation is applied in bad conditions at the bad moment, and people take it too much, then it will be a poison. If the same medication is took at a good moment in good proportion, it will cure. But there is no neutral effect. So design can sometimes even make the situation even worse because it's just a promise, and people believe in the promise and they won't see the results. So it's really the way. And my advice is also to think about the governance of design. Design is not just methodologies, cool methodologies like rapid prototyping. It's also the governance. Who decide? Who pay? Who owns it? Who decide what we will do afterwards? And very often we only think about design as a series of methodologies that we align, etc. And we never think about the governance of it. And that we need to make sure that there is not only one people who decide what we make afterwards. So my other advice would be, the first advice would be think about ethics and develop a reflection about ethics. It can be very concrete. It's not just philosophizing. And the second is be more aware about the governance of design, who is around the table, who decide, and how to make sure that the governance is open, that there is no, it's not because it's made with politicians that the politician must decide. And in our new programs, we are working on new governance because we know that it's a way to make the project more sustainable. And but yes, that would be my two advice: ethics and governance of design.
Yeah, so going back to the reflection that we were having here and reflecting on those two elements, governance and ethics, we had in the co-creation ecosystem elements, we were talking about standards, we were talking about ways of like stance, ways of thinking, ways of being, and the conditions. So it's interesting that you mentioned the ethics, because it might be something that's so like crossover different elements, but we hadn't that element as a standalone element, so that might be something to include. As well as with the governance, we had roles and responsibilities, but maybe there's more than that, so it's governance. Just food for thought. Like there were those two elements that maybe we need to incorporate in our different co-creation ecosystem elements and think how we mix it both.
So yeah, I loved your presentation, Stefan. That was very inspirational, and I can see the goodwill that it's behind all these initiatives. And yeah, I think that's so important, because when we talk about co-creation, sometimes we talk about what's the tipping point, about what you mentioned about all the processes, the tools and everything, but it's about like the behaviors, the mindsets that we are bringing in, and what's actually like the purpose behind it, that it's really important. And sometimes we don't talk enough about that. So I really liked how, like within all these residencies, you've actually been having like different outcomes, having different outcomes in mind. So building the capability of people, building also the sustainability and creating this community for sharing knowledge. I just feel there are like so many elements that go beyond those projects that have greater impact and are thinking on the long term. And it's interesting what you said, that initially that was, like it was needed that you were building the capability of designers, of sociologists to do this work. But then that changed as the situation changed and people developed those capabilities. So I was thinking, and we talk about this at Taxi many times, that actually that's how we think of success at Taxi, when we are building our so when we are getting out from the challenge, or how do you say, like when we are creating the pathway for losing kind of our jobs, that means that community is actually taking the lead. In this instance, it's the designers, but I wonder as well, how can we not just build the capability of designers, but also people in community, so in those regional areas, how can we just not have designers fly in and out or come in and out, and actually build the capability of community members that can actually self-determine what they want to see in their region or in the area. So I think that's a challenge that we are having at Taxi, and perhaps that's the evolution Taxi is taking as well. Initially in Australia, and I haven't been for that long at Taxi, but like what I've seen is that perhaps we were doing for people as people didn't know that much. Like we were doing things for government, we were doing things for clients, because there was not this understanding about co-design. But then as there is more designers, or as there is more people in actually the public sector that understand this, we are actually moving into coaching and mentoring. So how do we actually build the capability of public servants as well to be doing that, and to do it like internally? And what we've been doing, and what we are pushing ourselves to do more of, is to actually build the capability of communities. So we are kind of going into the extreme of co-creation, and actually us stepping back and then creating the conditions for community to lead the change they want to see. So yeah, I just wanted to share those reflections.
There are many interesting things in what you say. I think it's really because I think we all got to realize that we are a very small organization in front of a huge and an impossible change. So we are what we call a concrete utopia. And the only way we can have a role or an impact is to create movement, because we are nothing compared to big government. So I think we all try to create movement, and what we can do is to have strategies in the movement. So how can you build a strategy when you're small in front of huge problems and huge organization? The first thing is that you can't do it alone, so you got to create this kind of community, and maybe to have in mind that it's a logistics. So it takes many time. It's gathering people exactly as you do today, the Basque Country. It's be the third space where people are happy to come. But it takes it's more logistics, and you got to sometimes, and it's the know-how of innovation program. How do you build an innovation program like Territoire Résidence? Or it's a discipline as itself in a way. Because when you think about it, it's more action research. It's not consultancy, for sure. It's collective action research. You got to find money to do it. One of the questions is, how do you create the business model of this? Who wants to pay, and how do you get so it's very project oriented, strategy oriented, logistic oriented, and it's not just the funny face of innovation. It's really when I talk also about boring innovation, it's really in the long term. So yes, it's a craft, and it's something that we need to develop, and yes, I think we need to build scenarios to be, if we want to be strategic. And maybe my regret now, years after, is not having built future scenarios of this, because if we took time to simulate how it could evolve in 5 or 6 or 10 years, like a prospective scenarios, maybe we would have realized that there was a risk that we miss this community, that we didn't see it changing as we saw it changing. So the community still exists, but it's more a bunch of different communities, and we were like, oh, we didn't see him since years now, and he has created an agency in Toulouse, or we didn't meet for years. So maybe we should have built future scenarios before, to have in mind this kind of change. And yes, that's something. And it's also how Taxi or La 27e Région are kind of third space. We are not consultancy. We are not public authorities. We are something else. We are a new kind of organization who is there for the communities. And sometimes for governments, it's difficult to understand what we are exactly, and they don't know where to put us in calls, or they don't know how to put us. So we also need to explain the value that we bring to the building of this, and because we are strange UFOs in the ecosystem. Okay.
And that's part also of the boring revolution, right? How do we innovate in those procurement processes so that they see the value in this? And how we also invest. It was a really interesting reflection that you both were doing on how we actually focus or put effort in building the infrastructure itself, or the structures that need to be in place in order to have the conditions, in order to have the spaces for them to do this type of processes. And not only focusing in the process itself, but the whole infrastructure that needs to be around. to enable for this type of change to happen. Thank you both. It has been a pleasure to have you both, and Chris as well, who had to leave a little bit earlier. We'll continue to work here, reflect on the challenges that you also share with us, and we are in touch. We will continue to build this journey together. So it's very exciting to have international partners and continue to contrast and build together this co-creation ecosystem. Thank you both.
With great pleasure. Have a great seminar.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.